Thank you so much for joining us this evening, spending part of your Tuesday. Before we jump into housekeeping and introductions, I would love to start us off in the manner of friends with a shared moment of silence. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining Conversation with Friends, our virtual series with alumni. My name is Clayton Willis. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Assistant Director of Young Alumni Engagement, and we're looking forward to such a wonderful conversation tonight. I'm excited to share more with you about our speakers, but I do want to cover a couple of housekeeping terms first. I want to encourage everyone to keep their video on if you feel comfortable doing so. It'll really help us feel full participation of everyone who has joined. And though while we are virtual, we can still feel that sense of community. I also want to encourage you to change your Zoom name to include your full name and class year for alumni and for any other constituencies, parents of alumni, former faculty and staff to include that in your name. You can sort of think of this as your virtual name tag. And that way we can really see and get a sense of who's in the room. You should be able to do this by clicking on the three dots in your upper right hand screen and selecting the rename option. I will ask that you keep yourself on mute just to minimize any distractions. We'll save asking questions for the dedicated Q&A portion at the end of the evening. So throughout the night, if you do have any questions, please feel free to send them to me via the chat function, and we are happy to ask on your behalf. If you would like to ask your question yourself, please just note that in your message, and we'll call on you once we get to the Q&A. Now, finally, to get to the reason of the evening. I'm excited to introduce our featured speakers, Hannah Bristol from the class of 2010, Stephanie Everett from the class of 2015, and Liz Keeney from the class of 1972, in conversation with Board of Trustees member Kat Dawson from the class of 2004. Kat, over to you.
Thanks so much, Clayton. And I wanted to shout out Clayton and Ava for putting this together this evening, for making this all possible. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'm Kat Dawson. I'm a Sidwell Friends alum, class of 2004. And hey, Amy, how are you? It's good to see you. Hi, Alex. Great to see some friendly faces here. Um, and a current trustee of the school, which is a huge honor. So I'm really grateful to you all for joining us this evening. We've decided that we'll introduce ourselves. So what I was thinking, what we've decided to do is to, I'm just going to throw out our first question and invite the panelists to answer. For the first one, I'll just have you all, I'll just sort of call on you alphabetically and you can introduce yourselves. So the panelists will be giving their own intros. And then we'll keep it a little bit more dynamic from there. As we go, I think Clayton already said this, but just as a reminder, if you want to, oh, hi, Marissa Gerson. If you want to throw your, if you have questions, please feel welcome to throw those in the chat and we'll get to those toward the end. So our first question this evening is, how has being out in the workplace, even if only provisionally, impacted your relationship to work? And I'm thinking here of a broad range of possibilities, from social things like enabling you to feel more generally at ease, or perhaps to find affinity with other LGBTQ colleagues, to more concretely professional things like plugging into networks and either finding a mentor or being one. I'm also curious to know whether you've always been out or had to come out, or if you're someone who feels like they have to come out repeatedly over time. So, Hannah, do you want to kick us off?
Happy to. Thank you all so much for joining, and also great to see some familiar faces. I'm Hannah Bristol. I use she, her pronouns. I am an alum from the class of 2010. I currently live in Washington, D.C., so nice to be close by still. And I most recently was a senior advisor in the White House Office of Public Engagement, where I worked with young people, the LGBTQI plus community, and also on gun violence prevention. I got involved in political work while I was a student at Sidwell with student Democrats and did a lot of volunteering and going to Virginia, which is also where I grew up. to help out with political campaigns and have been doing it ever since. And my background is especially in youth political engagement, especially working with young people on college campuses. So I've worked on a number of political campaigns since I worked on the Obama campaign, um, and I went to Middlebury College. So really excited to be here with you all. I guess I mentioned this in my bio, but like my most recent like full-time job was uh working in the Office of Public Engagement of the White House with the LGBTQI plus community. And so like intrinsic in the role and like within my resume is that work. And so so within that it's like, I was working with the LGBTQ community every day, like in a lot of my interactions with people in the workplace, like that was one of the first things that they knew about me. Um, and so within that I felt like there was a lot of responsibility to create community for other LGBTQ people who are working in the White House, especially creating community among women, among trans and non-binary people, and making sure that there was like that there were opportunities for people to feel plugged in and to find community and to find um, camaraderie. And I think that that was really helpful in terms of, that has always been really helpful in terms of like my ability to get things done, and also in terms of my ability to like build strong relationships that you can then call on when you need to work with people. So that is I guess that's kind of a short answer, but I'll pass it to the next one and we can come back to me.
Stephanie?
Yeah, happy to pop in. Hey everyone. I'm Stephanie or Steph. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from the class of 2015. I currently live in New York City, where I work as an actor full time. A little bit more about my background. I actually went to Dartmouth College to play soccer, and a bunch of injuries playing soccer led me back to theater in a more serious way. And so that's what I've been doing, theater and a little bit of TV and film. Um, and I like to joke that my time at Sidwell was mainly spent playing for the men's baseball team. So that kind of did the coming out for me. Um, I came out in high school and have never really had to come out again, thankfully. And while I still play baseball in New York, for a women's team, which I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to do, that space feels very much like home. But at work as an actor, it has been very interesting for me to actually find out that being a lesbian is very strange in the theater world. The theater world is run by gay men, predominantly gay white men. And so my identity really butts up against that. And so I find myself constantly either code switching to fit in because I mostly do musicals. And so for me, going to work every day is really about trying to be a guide, to show up fully as myself, to show up in the clothes that I wear, even if I'm playing some very preppy, girly girl, to show up as myself and to sort of help be a guiding light for any actors that are coming up now and need to see more Black queer women specifically in the space.
And Liz?
So I'm Liz Keeney, a class of 72. I retired in May after a career of teaching and being an administrator, mostly student affairs work at the college level. Um, and for the last 30 plus years at Kenyon College. I pretty much came out as I arrived at Kenyon. I had been at Harvard before. That was not a safe place in the late 80s and 90s for me to be out. I got here and about half the senior staff and a number of senior faculty members were out. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a different place, which was a big relief. I over the course of my career have been more closeted at times about being significantly neurodivergent, and that was not always acceptable. Um, but within student affairs and other student work, um, I've been able to be, because of being out, a more genuine ally to students, and that's felt like possibly the most important work I've been able to do. At different times, and also an ally to younger staff members and faculty, and a mentor perhaps. So I think that's probably all for now.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful and auspicious way to start. And I really appreciate the distinct experiences that each of you are all articulated, because I think they capture something really broad, but also shared among these experiences. This sort of overlaps a little bit with what each of you has said, but I want to dig in a little bit more. So I'm curious about some of the ways that your identity, and right, we know that identity is intersectional and that there are different parts of us that are present at all times, and different pieces of us that are maybe more prevalent or articulate at more times. What are some of the ways that your identity, however you refer to or understand that at a given moment, shapes how you contribute in the workplace? And I'm thinking here really of specific initiatives you've participated in or led or felt drawn to in the workplace or other professional contexts that you feel like you've really been drawn to or begun or engaged fully in related to your identity. Whoever wants to go first can just hop in.
I can hop. There's something a lot of people don't know is that when you see a show at any level, there is someone in the cast who has volunteered to be what's called a deputy, and they work with the union that a lot of actors belong to make sure that the company you're working for is upholding a certain set of standards, is are like being good humans basically, but very specifically following the contract and the protections that we all have as actors. And so I often find myself gravitating toward, it's the job that no one really wants to do because there's a lot of paperwork. And if there's a problem, there's a lot of bureaucracy. And I often find myself gravitating towards volunteering to be the equity deputy because I know beyond just making sure Sally's getting her physical therapy every week, like there are other queer people in the cast, or I work a lot with on mostly femme shows and have worked with a lot of trans women in these spaces and trying to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with their dressing room and accepted and has a place to go so that they can do their work day in and day out. And so that's just that is the most power I could amass as just an actor on a show to help, all my queer siblings feel comfortable and know that there is someone they can talk to because it's still not something we can really talk to even in an artist space and a creative space.
I can jump in. I think that for me, like as a queer woman, like it just feels really important to make sure that everything that we're doing that is for the LGBTQ community is encompassing of the entire community and is like ensuring protections for the entirety of the community. And so a lot of what I have done in the workplace is like make sure that, the diversity of the community is reflected in outreach that we're doing in like meetings that are being created and events that are being popped up, and really making sure that that like spaces feel like spaces that are welcoming and inclusive of everybody. I also think that like something that I have done a lot of in the workplaces, working with queer and trans kids, especially, and just making sure that like everything that we are doing is is oriented around like creating safety and support for kids and like making sure that they have the opportunity to like see a future for themselves that is like bright and awesome and know that like they are loved and know that that there are people who are really in their corner and caring about them. And I think that, so much of the political environment like comes down onto kids in ways that you don't necessarily even realize. And I also think that like right now we're seeing a lot of like intentional fracturing of the community and like, wedges being drawn to try to separate out sexual orientation from gender identity and move us from a community that's an umbrella. And I just think that like in initiatives that I've done in the workplace and like events that I've created, like making sure that we're like really fighting for everybody and that we're um not allowing political discourse to like fracture the LGBTQ community and that we're keeping all the letters there is really important and something that I think is really important for everybody to like be sure to emphasize and advocate for in all spaces that we are in.
I've lost Liz.
Sorry, Kenyon is a Google campus, and so Zoom always throws me a little bit. Um, yeah, I think back 20, 25 years ago and, where we were then and where we are now. And in the early days here, you know, I and a number of other people were having to constantly go, huh, we're here, and fight for a variety of things. And I think about the battle around partners benefits, back before marriage, a long time ago. And we were divided about how to bring that battle home. There were a lot of people who were very angry and pretty militant and wanted to basically try to win the day that way. And because I sat on senior staff, I was actually able to work from within and to convince the guy who was in charge of the college's finances that it was not okay for his family to have a benefit that my hypothetical family could not have. And I remember the look on his face when he finally got it. And the sort of like, oh my God, what have I been doing? And other people had been trying to convince him for months. I mean, we'd had these long, torturous meetings. And I think, my Quaker inner being, which Sidwell was a gift from Sidwell. My family are not Quakers. Really carried the day there. So
These are all such fabulous responses, in part because they take up such different sort of initiatives. Stephanie, I appreciated that you sort of spoke to the work that you're doing within your organization. Hannah, to the ways that you are looking outside of your organization, and sort of leveraging that as a sort of courage to speak up for others who can't speak for themselves. And Liz, how you are leveraging Quakerism and Quaker practice to sort of do this really necessary work that we often think of as binary. We often think of sort of agitation from the exterior and work from the inside and interior as a binary, but they have to go together, right? We have to have sort of both parts of this to make change happen. Thank you so much for these thoughts. Um, this is maybe a more sort of simple question that comes before work, but that happens sort of before work. But I'm curious to learn what your experiences of being out in the workplace have been, not just coming out right, but being out. Does it feel like something that's pretty straightforward? Stephanie, I'm thinking, you said you came out once and never had to come out again. And so I'm wondering if that's a kind of thing where you all have felt like you had to come out once and have never had to do that and never had to negotiate that really beyond that, or if being out at work is something that you have to negotiate differently in different contexts. In particular, I'm also wondering whether there are steps that you have felt you needed to take at certain moments to feel particularly safe.
I can go first. I have always worked in like extremely progressive spaces, and so like I have just been really lucky that like everywhere that I have worked has been very pretty accepting of like people bringing their whole selves to work, and like now it's like very much on my resume. And so I just feel like that is like a part of who I am. And so I think that more often now I'm thinking about the like responsibility of being really like open and intentional about like who I am and how I'm representing myself and how to create space for people who like may not be like fully out or fully bringing their full selves to a certain space. And I feel like sometimes that's like being in a space, especially with people who are younger than me, and like bringing up like the WNBA or like queer music or like whatever it is that might be like a gateway to conversation for them to feel like they are like able to like fully participate or to participate in conversation or like talk about things that they're interested in without having to like fully I don't know, without having to like fully be out or fully like figure out what that means for them. I think that is but like by just like being myself in the workplace, like I feel like that is very much how I've been trying to create space, especially for people like interns or like people in their first job out of college, like just kind of trying to identify myself as like someone who they could talk to if they feel like they are looking for somebody to talk to.
Yeah, I would say for me, work has often felt like the safest place. We're a small college town, very liberal town in the middle of a very red county with a very conservative Christian college down the road a little bit. Um, and so leaving campus has sometimes not felt particularly safe, though I pass pretty easily unless I'm wearing a shirt that makes it pretty obvious. Um, but I do sometimes do a what am I wearing before I'll go to Kroger. And it's not particularly safe in my family. So I feel really blessed to live where I do um, and work where I did.
I similarly, I never feel unsafe. Um, but I, for the sake of the job, definitely have to hide a lot more than I hoped I would have to. I talk a lot with my partner about how I notice my queerness more than my blackness when I'm at work. Um, that it's the more, for lack of a better word, unusual thing about me in the room. And, I keep a basket of my old femme clothes under the bed for when I need to audition, because auditioning is 75% of the job. And so if I can't put on this other persona for 2 minutes, I don't get a job. And so I know if I get the job and I show up to rehearsal as myself, no one's going to say anything and I will be safe. But it's predicated on kind of putting a lot of myself away just to get into the room still, which is unfortunate. But, um, as like TV and film shift our perspective of like what diversity looks like in a cast, theater will follow suit probably in 20, 30, 40 years, but it is slowly shifting, but not, fast enough.
Thank you so much for these responses. I I really appreciate your transparency about that uh need to keep the basket of your old femme clothing under your ba bed, right? Which is sort of anathema to what one thinks one might someone of a younger generation might experience, right, on some levels.
Right.
Someone who's been
And the
out
fact that
forever.
it's, yeah, and the
Yeah, go
fact that
ahead.
it's like a conversation, like all my agents know I'm gay. Like we
Yeah.
all talk about it. We all look for roles that more like accurately reflect my life experience, but it's definitely part of the conversation when they send me a role with like and this is one where we're gonna need to, uh,
Shout out the
and
old.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, we all talk about it, laugh about it, whatever. But yeah, it's definitely a part of the everyday work.
Hannah, you said, I don't remember if it was in response to the previous question or one before this, but you said something about I believe it was you who said something about the sort of weaponization and splitting of queerness or of gender and sexuality, right? And that's one of these, what Stephanie just pointed to is the ways in which, right, people read those things differently. People who, experience gender and sexuality differently, both as people who have diverse experiences of those things and we run into those frictions differently in the world, the frictions of gender and sexuality, right? Because some of them are more visible than others, right? Thank you so much for this. And Liz, I really appreciated that you said that work is the safest place. I think that's fabulous. That's such a special workplace to be a part of, and not the only experience of that, certainly. Um, I want to ask, and I don't know how you will each respond to this. I'm really excited to learn. Your responses keep surprising me, which I think is really exciting. But I want to know whether any of the conditions of being or coming out at work for each of you have changed since entering the workforce. I know that I would think that the longer you've been in the workforce, the more they may have changed, but maybe things have changed in the last couple of years in surprising ways. I know that the last couple of weeks in particular have been a fraught time, but I'd love to think sort of on a range of timescales as you all can.
I can take a crack at that one. Um, the older I got, the less I gave a damn about what other people thought. Um, and now being retired, I'm like, I feel like not only can I be more out there, but I feel obliged to be more out there for people who are younger and for whom it may be a lot more dangerous and for whom there is a lot more risk. I don't have dependents. You know, I, I promised my therapist a couple of weeks ago, well, I won't be dousing myself in gasoline and lighting myself on fire, but I may get arrested, and for somebody who's pretty introverted, she sort of did one of those. But the reality is, I don't have a lot to lose at this point. Um, so
Yeah, I don't feel like I've been in the workforce for like all that long, so I like appreciate Liz your perspective on it, and I think that one of the like greatest blessings of my job in the White House was the opportunity to work with a lot of older LGBTQ people, and especially like as the Respect for Marriage Act was signed into law, like having the opportunity to talk with and meet just a lot of like older couples and plaintiffs and people who were had um like risked and sacrificed so much more than I um have ever had to in order for me to be able to have the life that I have. Um and so I think that like one thing that is like extremely important is making sure that we know our history and that we're continuing to like engage in conversation and learn about um people who have fought in order for us to have our rights and making sure that that history doesn't get lost, and especially like, as that history becomes less and less part of public education or part of public record, like making sure that we are taking responsibility to be educating people about that. Um, I think the biggest thing that I've like noticed as a change is just how how the experiences of people younger than me are different than even the experiences that I had, and I find that to be, I think about like some of the, especially like in entertainment, like some of the queer role models who exist now for younger people, and I'm like, man, if that had existed when I was in like middle school or early high school, like that would have been really incredible, and it just always like, I feel like I'm having the experience that I'm having, and it is inspiring to like see, to hopefully see that the experience is going to be different for future generations. And I think that that's always like the promise of our community. I think one thing that brings me sadness is feeling like that might be turning for the first time in a while, and that, it could be that younger queer people are not having the same freedoms as people who are slightly older than them, or feeling as comfortable being themselves as people slightly older than them. And so I just once again to reiterate, I think what I've said in a lot of my answers, just like making sure that we're continuing to like fight to protect that, and to make people feel as like welcome and comfortable as themselves, and preserve those gains that have been so hard won.
This is so well said, Hannah. And actually, exactly the kinds of things I've been thinking about with Cynthia Erivo making her circuit of the world. She was my first Broadway show, in The Color Purple, playing a queer woman. And no one knew at the time that she herself was queer. And I sat next to my mom, who I was not out to yet, and I watched this story, and I just ruined me. It led to my coming out to my family. It led to me going into theater because I saw someone like me on stage. And now, with everything she's done for Wicked, I know that there are so many people who are going to pursue this field and just feel free to be themselves. And she's just one person having the ripple effect that she's having, and so that's something that I aspire to have, that I hope a lot of other people aspire to have. Yeah, I've not been doing the work long. I'm a younger grad, but already just knowing that, like, my agents called me after Wicked came out and said, Broadway is never really going to cast Elphaba as a white woman ever again. And today, a Black woman took over the role for the first time in history, full time. So it's already changing things in a very, very traditional field.
That's really exciting to hear, Stephanie. Thank you for
Mm-hmm.
breaking that news to us beyond the theater world. I really like that, and it sounds to me as though um, these the changes that we feel, even if we've only been in the workforce a short time, are palpable, that there are shifts that we can point to, right? Um, in different ways, your questions have responded to my next question, which has to do with allyship, but I do want to ask it because I want to dry that out. As we were having the preparatory conversations for this evening's conversation, one of the things that people kept coming back to was the concept of mentorship, right? How the people around us, from a teacher at Sidwell to a younger colleague at work and everyone in between, can impact how we think about and see the world. And at the same time, none of us are any just one thing at any given point in time, right? We all have these intersectional identities, as in our various genders and sexualities and racial identifications and geographic identifications and linguistic faculties and so on. So I wanted to ask sort of how the multiple ways that each of you identify contribute to your ability to keep doing the work that you do. Maybe that's already been answered. But I wanted to surface that alongside the ways in which allies and mentors have impacted you, particularly but not exclusively related to queer identities.
I can speak to um, I work in such a creative industry where there is space for everyone. It can just be hard to find that space. And obviously there are more opportunities and more mentors for people of a certain demographic or background. Um, but one thing I've always liked about my field is that I don't have to think of what I have to say. I just have to say what someone's already written for me and hope that someone connects with it. And if I'm the right person for the job, I'm the right person. If I'm not, I'm not the right person. And it's not really about me as a person. I love that I've been able to disconnect from that. And so some of my mentors have been people who are so drastically different from me because they are able to just evaluate me based on my work and we can work on the rest. Um, I definitely know I've been the first like gay woman a lot of people have worked with, um, especially since I do musicals. And it's always fascinating to get into a space on merit and then learn how to work on the rest and build those relationships.
Hannah or Liz, do you have something to add about mentorship or allyship?
Sure. I think the constant stream of students through my office, you know, regardless of how they identify, I think, it's always been about that. I started out as a faculty member and I loved the one-on-one teaching and I really hated lecturing. I was good at it, but I never liked it. So when the chance came to move over to a more administrative role where basically my job was going to be one-on-one with students for 90% of the time, it was an easy shift. Um, in recent years, that's expanded to junior faculty and junior staff, and particularly a couple of younger faculty. I started to say kids who were struggling with the whole trying to get tenure nonsense, and being able to be sort of the older, calmer person really helped. But I think back, trying to balance all of the identities. And I used to joke at a time when I was perhaps not as healthy as I am now that I could get dismissed from any jury pool in this county with 5 words: disabled, Quaker, lesbian, feminist, PhD. And unfortunately, it's true, and it was true then, and it was probably equally true, if not more so, right now. So
I'm trying to think of something that is different than what I have said already, but I think that something that I said a lot when I was meeting a lot with kids, especially with trans kids, is that like it is a like I think often people feel like nervous about like bringing their full self into a space or nervous about how you are going to be like perceived or judged by other people. And actually, like, it is, it's like a gift to other people for them to see you like being the fullest expression of yourself. And by you coming into a space and being the fullest expression of yourself, like, that allows everyone to be more comfortable being the fullest of expression of themselves, no matter like what that is. And that may be a less like visible identity than being LGBTQ, but like it allows everybody to feel more comfortable being themselves at work. And I think that um for me, I uh always like I feel very aware of like my gender in the workplace and figuring out like how to dress professionally and or like in business clothes in a way that feels like comfortable for me, or how to show up in a meeting in a way that is like appropriate, or like when is the right time for me to speak up. And I think that I often, because I do have done youth work, like was often finding myself being like the youngest person in the room, also like advocating to people who were older than me who didn't fundamentally understand like the work that I was doing. And just seeing, particularly like looking to other women who are, presenting differently than sort of the stereotypical norm of how women are presenting in the workplace has been extremely important to me in terms of figuring out how I want to show up, and like what is like my way of being in a space. And so I feel really grateful to those women who've like been the fullest expression of themselves and allowed me to feel comfortable, being myself in that way.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I continue to be struck in each of your all's responses at the degree to which it seems like you are all in different ways leading within your communities, even if that leadership is just in bringing your full self to work. Hannah, that's such a good point about the degree to which bringing your full self to work is itself a kind of leadership that's really important. Um, so I want to thank each of our panelists for their responses this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you in this Q&A. Um, I want to ask. I'm gonna move to the we're gonna move to the Q&A section. There are already some questions that have come through this evening. I want to invite you to raise your hand and ask a question, or drop. Is that okay, Clayton? Or drop one in the chat,
Yep.
whatever you feel called to do. And we'll go. I'm just gonna go in order of the ones that I see here. And thank you so much again, Clayton, for aggregating this. The first question that I see is that the school's non-discrimination policy did not include sexual orientation until 1992. As alumni spanning these years, can you talk a little bit about how the school has evolved over time? And actually, I see another question here that's similar to that. So if it's okay, and no disrespect to whoever asked these, but I think it would be interesting to pair these questions together. So if these are your questions and you feel like I'm not getting at something, do just shout at me in the chat or verbally here. But there's another question that's about what Sidwell could have done differently to support the panelists while they were at the school from a parent of a recent graduate. So I think in two parts, how do you think that Sidwell has evolved over time? And what do you think the school could have done differently during your time? Who wants to start?
Take a crack at it. Um, when I my time at Sidwell was a bit fraught. When I came out, I was bullied by the one other out gay person in my class. Um, and it's hard for me to separate my memories of Sidwell from this person, because when I think about the school itself, it was a wonderful place to be. There were so many opportunities I could not have gotten at any other high school, especially with the recent renovations that have been done to the art center specifically and the meeting house and just that beautiful space. Um, Sidwell itself, supported the Gay Straight Alliance Club and supported pride events. And, I felt really lucky, even though I was dealing with my own turmoil, um, that I didn't feel like I had to hide at school, and that I didn't feel like any teacher treated me differently if they knew what was going on. I felt really lucky to be there in the time that I was there.
I'm going to invite our panelists to share, but I don't want to put everyone on the spot. So feel free to just tap out or give a little shake of a head if you want to pass. That's fine.
Um, there were no gay people at Sidwell when I was there. That is, of course, not true, but but for all intents and purposes, it was true. So yeah, and I don't think Sidwell could have changed that at the time. I mean, late 60s, early 70s, it would have been unsafe for the school and drawn attention to folks had the school by some fluke been more progressive. So
Yeah, you're right. An LGBTQ historian, I can say, we have the gay liberation movement. The early strains of it start in the early 50s, but we don't really get a coalescing movement. And indeed, or until 1969, 71, we don't get really any even local level policy changes until the mid to late 70s. So I think you're spot on there, Liz.
Yeah, I think that like it is just really interesting, and this is partly like generational, just to see how things have changed and like how I don't know, like how m many more kids it seems are out now than were even when I was there. And a shout out to my dad who's on the line, who's the crew coach at Sidwell for the girls team. So I feel like I stay up to date about what's happening with the current students through him. But yeah, so it is like interesting to see. I feel like my experience was very like aligned with like what it was like in 2010. But one thing that I think was really powerful that happened at Sidwell when I was there was the Westboro Baptist Church protest that happened across the street from Sidwell, and there was a huge uh, counter protest that like a tremendous number of students from the student body got together, and a lot of the like signs and response from the students were very staunchly like pro in support of the LGBTQ community, and that's like very much what students were standing up for. And I really like remember that as like an early like powerful political action that I was able to be part of, and how like special it is to have been at a school where that was like embraced by the school. And is something that was so widely supported by the student body.
That's really exciting to hear, Hannah. And so thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't realize that that had happened. There's a question for me that I would like to studiously avoid by calling on Alex, but I will answer it in a second. My dear friend and colleague, Alex McCoy, and your beautiful child, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, it comes on the heels of that last question. So and is certainly a little bit selfish. So as a member of this community and an alum and a current employee at Sidwell Friends School who works with Kat on some of our Quaker Life board items as well, but I'm the coordinator for the Center for Ethical Leadership. So I'm curious from this panel if there's any advice you would give back to your younger self. Stephanie, I so appreciate you naming like you came out in high school. I certainly did not. And was, somewhere in between Liz and Hannah and Stephanie being in class of 2004. So curious advice you would give to kind of your younger self as a student at Sidwell Friends, if you could. And then also to the school, if there's anything that you can think of that you're like, this is ways that, would have better supported me at that time, potentially, if that's the case. But just kind of thinking in that perspective, if there's anything you would want to share.
This is less like interpersonal and more curricular. And I don't know if this has changed since I was at Sidwell, but in you asking that question, I was just thinking, and also, we have our LGBTQ historian moderator, just that like I don't feel like I learned any queer history at Sidwell, and I I really feel like I'm like continuing to have to like educate my like do personal education of myself, and I don't feel like there was really any like I don't feel like we really like read any queer books. Like I just that, I think that that was completely not part of the curriculum. And so it would have been cool to like study and learn that. And I hope that that has changed, and I feel like it likely has, but that's something that I would have appreciated.
I love a curricular answer, Hannah, and it's exactly what Alex was looking for. So thank you so much. Liz, Stephanie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I come with perhaps a less helpful answer, maybe one that's harder to gauge. But for me, both when I was applying to high schools, when I was there, and now that I'm out of it, what has always struck me about Sidwell are the teachers and how special they are. And, what I would tell myself, my younger self, is to find an adult that I could trust. At the time that I was there, the guidance counselor was known for sharing secrets. So I knew I could not go to the guidance counselor. And, I think back like, oh, should I have told my English teacher like something was going on? I felt so close to her, but I don't know, whatever can be done to foster relationships, between teachers and students in that way. Um, Letting people know that there is someone beyond just like the one person who's technically assigned to help with their interpersonal issues, um, could be helpful. But I also found it completely separately. I found it so validating when I didn't have to be the one telling the school, hey, could we put a pride flag up? It's almost June. I found it so amazing when it felt like higher ups were thinking ahead and celebrating things openly, instead of a coalition of students having to scheme how to make people feel included and seen and heard.
I just had a flashback of seventh grade sex education, and I'm just like, they could have not done that. I'll spare you the details.
Yeah, a history of sex education and K through 12 education in the United States could it's certainly a harrowing thing to dig into in all possibility. Um, do we have other questions? I can take the one that was asked about me directly. I don't know how interesting that'll be. If you have other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand and I'll
We have one from Gloria Cohen.
oh, great. Gloria, you want to unmute yourself? Great.
Did I? Yes.
Perfect.
I'm
Thanks.
I'm not Zoom proficient yet, but I will be. One of the things that strikes me as a plain straight person, I use the I use the pronouns she, her, old lately. It seems to me that one of the issues is that the larger population has not come to look at differences among people as ordinary and of course.
Mm.
And I think that's what makes things work in the end. Partly, I keep thinking about how the word Ms. was introduced many years ago, and nobody wanted to use it. We had Miss and we had Mrs. Why do we need Ms.? And yet now it's so commonplace and nobody argues about it. So I think there's something about making things, of course, and ordinary that um, over a period of time and maybe different generations, maybe it takes a lot to move people from what they've been thinking to a better way of thinking. I think of it as more educated, but that's kind of fuzzy. Um, what in what ways can straight people help change this environment so that if I run into somebody, like Stephanie, that I don't immediately think, oh, she's Black. oh, she's gay. Oh, I just think, oh, I can talk to her. And that's it. How do we? And part of this is because I have a friend who just had a 65th birthday, and I met him 30 some years ago when we worked together. And he was a very nice guy, and all the women in the office were talking about, do we have sisters we could fix up with this guy? And then we went to lunch, three or four of us, and he told us he was gay. And it was the first time he came out to anybody in the workplace. And I remember very distinctly that when he said, listen, I have to tell you something, I'm gay, that the rest of us went, oh, okay. So do you think we should have the salad or should we get the something else? Because it was a good workplace. We didn't care. How do we move the rest of the world in that direction? And especially now.
It's a great question. I want to invite, just if one of you wants to take this, you're welcome to. I'm also glad to hop in and um, say that I think at the core of your question is also the response that you had 30 odd years ago, right? And it is as you, and I see, hi Denise Terry, I see you nodding too. It's good to see you. I think I think also at the core of your question is the way that you responded, and I think at the core of that is on many levels Quaker values, right? Are those Quaker values that we hold dear of seeing, like sort of seeing the light in every person, of finding value in every person, of not needing someone to be self-same to us to value them, or even going so far as to understand that the thing that makes someone important and interesting and valuable is their difference from us, right? Anything to add?
I'll just add that I think that it is really important to find like communities that are like good for you to like ask questions and to not be afraid to ask about things that you don't know about, and just, to continue to shout out my dad while he's here. My dad and I like have had a lot of conversations about like different like issues that he encounters or things that he doesn't quite understand, and I just like and also my mom who's also on. I won't pick a parent, but just like their ability to continue to be open-minded and like ask questions and come to things with a learner's mindset, and like our ability to have an open conversation, I think is extremely, extremely important. And like same for me, like I think there are people who I feel comfortable asking questions about things that I don't understand, or that I like need more help to like understand the context. And I just think um that like finding those people is really important. Or if you are one of those people to other people, like uh sort of realizing what you are being what is being offered there, and not like not shutting people down for asking questions, but like helping them get to a place where you are on the same page, I think is really important. And then for, you know, straight or older people on the call, like if you are in community with very different people than, you know, those of us who are panelists on this call probably are, and you have access to like a wide network of people who probably don't who may not like be asking the same questions that you are asking, or may not have be exposed to like different communities the way that you are exposed to them. And I think making sure that like you view that as a responsibility, and that you are like bringing that into your conversations with your peers, like with your book club, like making sure that you are like sort of like defending queer people in every space that you're in, and like providing an opportunity for you to be a resource for your friends who maybe don't understand, I think is also extremely important. Because like we are all together in a mass education campaign to make sure that we are able to help people understand our community, and the our sort of like basic right to being able to like live freely and be ourselves, and And in order to do that, like we need people who are going into every community and engaging in conversation, like without judgment, but with an open mind to be able to make sure that people are able to have their questions answered and understand, what's what.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That's such a beautiful sort of call to action. You almost even said conversations with friends, so the segue couldn't have been better. For the interest of time, we are at the top of the hour. I do want to thank everybody for joining the call today. We truly appreciate you taking time out of your evening to be in community with us. Thank you to our speakers, Hannah, Liz, and Stephanie, for being so open and transparent and honest with your experiences. It's what strengthens this community. And so I'm so thankful for you all. And Kat for leading us through this phenomenal and eye-opening conversation, and for sharing your own unique and important perspective, even though you may have dodged that one question. Got the let the time run out on you. This event is being recorded, so if there are parts of this conversation that you would like to revisit, it'll be on our YouTube channel in the next few days, along with other past conversations with friends. If there are any lingering questions, feel free to send them to me and I can pass them along to the panelists. I do, in the spirit of what we've talked about this evening, I do want you to please mark your calendars for Friday, May 30th. That is the Lower School Pride Assembly and Parade, and we would love to have an alumni presence for the first time this year. The Lower School Administration is opening up their doors to other folks in the community, so more to come on that, but just wanted to give you a heads up. Additionally, we have more conversations with friends planned for the school year. Our next one is on April 14th with William Powell from the class of 1986 regarding his upcoming book, Breakthrough, The Quest for Life-Saving Medicines. And he'll be led in discussion with his classmate, David Schiskel. Thank you again. I hope to see you very soon, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.